So it is my honor to have Dr. Jay Trobec here and to be able to introduce him today. And I'm going to use the doctor as much as possible, if you don't mind, because, you know, we're at a university. Dr. Jay Trobec formal credentials include a certified broadcast meteorologist and certified consulting meteorologist designations from the American Meteorological Society, that is always a tough word, and National Weather Association, a broadcast seal of approval. His education includes a bachelor's degree from St. John's University, a master's degree from Mississippi State University, and a Ph.D. in atmospheric, environmental, and water resources from some South Dakota University up north. Gotta try. Jay started his broadcast career. It was actually very funny that we had that in our good news. Jay started his broadcast career as a sportscaster in North Dakota, and then moved to KELO to work in the news department in 1985 and to the weather department full-time in the 90s. Dr. Trobec is currently the chairman of the International Association of Broadcast Meteorology based in Dublin, Ireland, and recently served as commissioner on professional affairs for the American Meteorological Society for 6 years. He also enjoys teaching and has taught physical climatology and meteorology at that other university. In his spare time, you'll find him watching, playing, and refereeing soccer. And I believe it's also true that you and your broadcast are the winners of multiple Emmy Awards. Is that true? We might have to talk about that, at least in the question and answer section. So, if you join me in welcoming our speaker today, Dr. Jay Trobec.
Okay, let's see if I know how to turn this thing on. I don't do this too often. There we go. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. I'm delighted to be here because my background in Rotary goes back many, many years. In fact, about 30 years ago, I was part of what was called a group study exchange, which was 6 or 7 young professionals from the Sioux Falls area and surrounding area. We got to go for 4 weeks to go and speak at Rotary clubs in southern England. It was a fantastic experience. And what they did was they'd send the young professionals out with an older, more distinguished Rotarian to kind of lead the group. And in our case, it was a guy named Ted Munster. He coincidentally spells his name the same as this building across the street. But so we spent 4 weeks with Ted Munster, pretty much drinking in pubs every single night. So you're fortunate to have him here. Ted is, there's not much wisdom around anymore, and Ted was a very wise man. I could only assume in 30 years you've gotten even wiser.
You can assume all you want.
But I'm here to talk about South Dakota's place in weather history, and people have asked me, why have you stayed in South Dakota all these years? When I came here, I thought I'd be here a year, and I've been at KELO now for 36 years, I think. And part of the reason is because when it comes to weather, we got a pretty good thing going here in South Dakota. My thesis is this, that South Dakota is like a meteorological laboratory. We have all different kinds of weather, and I'd like to talk about a few of those. Just to let you know, we've got a huge place in world meteorology. First of all, temperature fluctuation. Back in 1943, this was a situation, the circle in the middle of your screen is the Black Hills. On one side of the hills was Arctic air. The southwest side, there was warm air, and the front, which is the leading edge of the air masses, waffled back and forth during the morning hours. And as it did that, the temperature went like this in a very dramatic fashion. This is an old-time thermometer that they had in the utilities office in Spearfish. If you look at that line right there, you can kind of see that see the way it bounces there? That's the temperature fluctuation that was going on. And here's what it said. The temperature went from 7:32 in the morning, 4 below, to 45 at 7:35, to 54 at 9 o'clock, then back to 4 degrees below zero. And all over that Black Hills area with the sloshing this front went through, bizarre things were happening. You know, imagine driving and all of a sudden your windshield fogs up and some of the trees burst because they had the expansion of the insides of the trees and stuff like that. But that's in the Guinness Book of World Records. as the world's greatest variance in temperature. That's one kind of temperature difference we have. Another one is heat bursts, and these happen a little bit more frequently. When you have a dying thunderstorm, you can have extreme drying occur in a very fast motion. And this was actually something that I wrote up and appeared in a journal paper, and here's what was going on. Back in this day in 2007, this is a radar side view over Sioux Falls. You can see there's some rain there, and the storm collapsed right over Sioux Falls. It ended. So what happens when the thunderstorm ends like that, you get a great downrush of air, and the air splashes to the ground and goes out. As the air drops, it heats dramatically, and it's drying. So here's what we had at the Pavilion of Arts and Sciences in Sioux Falls. We had a sensor there. You can see this is between 7 and 9 o'clock in the morning. We had the temperature do this and then do this. The dew point, the measure of humidity in the air, did this and then this. What it all means is that this is what was going on. Temperature rose from 77 to 90 in 48 minutes at like 7 o'clock in the morning. Also, extreme drying occurred along with this event, and we had some moderate wind gusts, which frequently happens along with a heat burst. But we have weather sensors, KELO does, at all these schools around the area. We were able to document this heat burst, and it's actually become one of the best known heat bursts in the entire world because we had all this documentation what happened, including the fact that they had just started taking high resolution satellite pictures, and they just happened to have it right over Sioux Falls that day. You can see this hole right here. The storm just kind of did this like a funnel right over Sioux Falls. And so it's been documented, and frequently now, when they talk about heat bursts, you'll see this appearing in scientific journals, at least cited, because of what happened right over Sioux Falls. Of course, we have hydrometeors meaning stuff falling from the sky. And of course, one of the most famous times we had hydrometeors was in 1972. Once again, a front just kind of sitting right over the Rapid City area. Strong surge of south wind brought in lots of humidity. And of course, the net result was this, the Rapid City flood, 15 inches of rain. Of course, Pactola Reservoir overtopped because a pontoon got stuck in the gates, and Rapid City flooded. And of course, this was the net result, 273 deaths until Hurricane Katrina. It was the greatest loss of life from a single flood event. And you can see the water just picked up the cars there. That's one of my favorite pictures showing how strong the water was. But also, we had another thing happen just a few years ago, 2010. This is a supercell. This is just north of I-90 at the Vivian exit on I-90. Aloft, according to a weather balloon launched by the Rapid City Weather Service, the temperature was 96 degrees below zero. At the ground, the temperature was 86 above, and it was humid, and the temperature difference set up extremely strong updrafts, and the net result was this. I was on the air at the time, and all of a sudden we started getting phone calls from people who were driving on I-90, and their cars were getting smashed by softball-size hail. And just a few miles north, this is what happened.
The damage is proof that it wasn't a typical South Dakota thunderstorm. Holes were punched through the top of buildings, and for Les Scott, he'll never forget what it sounded like.
The guy throwing bricks at the house, and there's many of them, and it was scary.
Scott watched as massive hailstones pummeled the ground. Today, the divots are still visible, some as large and deep as coffee cans. But when the hail stopped, a certain stone grabbed his attention.
I just happened to see this one fall, and the only reason I went out and got it because it had all these fingers sticking out of it. And I said, well, that's weird, and I said, I'll go get that one.
Scott originally wanted to make a daiquiri out of the hail, but decided to contact the National Weather Service instead. Today, they were in Vivian. They carefully took the stone from the freezer and placed it in a cooler with dry ice. The next stop was at the post office, where the hail had a date with the federally certified scale.
And the net result was this. Yes, the world record for weight in a hailstone, almost 2 pounds and 8 inches in diameter, also a world record. We also have some research that went on regarding hailstones. I thought this was fascinating. I don't know if you know about this. On the Black Hills, the School of Mines actually bought a plane. They fitted it with bulletproof glass and armor-plated the wings and everything like that. And They flew this with weather instruments in it through thunderstorms all over the central part of the United States, the nastiest storms you can ever imagine. Here's some of the flights going through this particular cell. And even though you had bulletproof glass, you had the armor-plated stuff on the plane, you can see this is what happened to that plane. Now, when they did this, they were looking for a pilot to do it. There was only one applicant. There's a guy named Tom Warner, and he's the guy who did it. And let me show you one of his videos. He got hit by lightning all the time. That was a big thing. Now, he described it as like being in a washing machine. And I asked him, you know, how does this compare? What do you think of the hurricane hunters? He said, they're wimps. They have nothing on this. But Tom also, he got interested in lightning as a result of doing this. And he has done some stuff that has made lightning understanding so much better. Now, when I started teaching up at SDSU, this is from one of my textbooks. Here's one of the graphics we show. This explains how lightning happens with the charge separation that goes on and the dart leaders and the return strokes and all that stuff. And so I used to have to show this like this and say, this is how it works. But you know what? Thanks to Tom, he bought a camera and a hard drive that did over 7,000 frames per second. And guess what? I don't have to show the diagram anymore. I can show some of the videos that Tom has taken. These are famous. You can actually see what's going on with the dart leaders coming down, the return stroke. That's how that happens. And then, you know, the multiple return strokes that happen. And people often ask me, they said, does lightning come from the top down or does it come from the bottom up? Well, you know, he's took another video. This is actually the KELO Tower in Rapid City. And if you look real close, what you'll see is, you'll see charges come down from the top, but you'll also see a spark coming up from the bottom. So I can actually say it does both. It comes from the top down, goes to the bottom up, and this video shows that. Again, 7,000 frames per second. So that's what it takes, and that's the first of multiple return strokes there. Here's another picture that Tom took. I think this is an amazing picture. Interstate 90 right here. This is going through the Black Hills. He was shooting a video, and a car drove by. He saw a car get zapped by lightning. And you can see spray around the car. You can see the way that the electricity is spread out, kind of like the Faraday cage effect. What do you suppose happened to the vehicle? Nothing. Nothing. Because the Faraday cage, nothing was ever reported. The car just kept right on going. So car is actually one of the safer places to be, I guess, if you have lightning. Of course, we also have tornadoes around here, and we're pretty famous for that. But some interesting things that are unique about our tornadoes. Here's a picture of a tornado, and this is a picture from Howard, South Dakota. What's interesting about this is not that it's a tornado, but this is when it was, 1884. For a long time, this was considered to be the oldest tornado picture ever taken. There was one, they found one in Kansas that's 2 months older. So this is the second oldest picture of a tornado. This is not Kansas, it says, although sometimes it feels like it. We do storm research around here, and some other interesting things have happened with weather and research in South Dakota. One of them involves, you know, when we say there's going to be a tornado, we say the tornado is moving east at 35 miles an hour or whatever. How do we know that? Well, in the old days, we just used to use an estimate. We'd say if a supercell is moving, you take the wind, and it's about 75% of the wind, and to the right of the main wind by about 30 degrees. It was just a pure ballpark figure, because sometimes it moves further to the right, sometimes it's faster, sometimes it splits, often it splits. Then you got one that goes this direction, one that goes this direction. Well, here is the way we now do it. If you take little points, this is what's called a hodograph. This is 10 meters per second, 20 meters per second. Each of these dots represents the wind at a different level of the atmosphere. You put it all together, and you can determine by the internal dynamics of the supercell exactly where it's going to go, how fast it's going to go, if it splits, where's the left one going to go and the right one going to go. And it's all because of this paper, which is now called the Bunker's Internal Dynamics Method. It was published here. It was published by Matthew Bunkers from the National Weather Service in Rapid City. Matt studied this, came up with this method. It is used not only by the Storm Prediction Center in the United States, it is used all over the world. And that was developed right here in South Dakota. And there's a look at Matt, still works in Rapid City, the Weather Service. If you want to meet him, he'll be in Del Rapids next week helping with the harvest at the family farm. We also have had a couple other things happen, interesting things. This is Manchester, South Dakota. And this is a researcher named Tim Samaras. And he is an electrical engineer by trade. He built these little things. He called them turtles. They're little discs. He put cameras in them. He put weather sensors in them. He found out that if he made it that conical shape, that the wind wouldn't pick it up from the tornado. And he put this right in front of the Manchester tornado. And the tornado went right over the top of that. And the net result was this. The world's record for pressure drop, 100 millibars pressure drop in 1 minute. That's from that little sensor you just saw him drop. And the lowest surface pressure ever measured on Earth, adjusted for elevation. I should mention that Tim, the guy just in that video, great guy. He was killed during the El Reno tornado, himself and his son, who were chasing that big tornado. The Weather Channel car got flipped over and stuff. That's what killed Tim, was right in that one. So, but anyway, that was another thing that was discovered in South Dakota. But wait, there's more. June 24, 2003, what we named at KELO Tornado Tuesday. 67 tornadoes in a 5-hour period happened here. And one thing I think was very interesting is one thing that happened on almost the last tornado of the night. And we had a storm chaser in the station. He was with me on the 10 o'clock news. And all of a sudden, one last tornado was forming out near the airport. And he raced out toward the airport. He did this. He called 911 because of what he was seeing. And this is what that sounded like when he made this call to 911 in Sioux Falls.
East of I-29, north by 90, moving northeast. Oh my God, oh my God. There's a plane right on the tornado. There's a plane. Oh my God, there's a plane almost got hit by the tornado. It's a jet liner. It's a jet liner. There's a jet going on the tornado. Okay. It's a jet going on the tornado.
It was a Northwest Airlines flight carrying a bunch of doctors and nurses from Sioux Falls. To stay up in the air, the pilot pushed the throttle forward, I guess, past the stops, whatever that means, burned out one of the engines going straight up, limped to Omaha, and got down safely. When I went back and looked at the data, I was able to match up the 911 call to the second, along with the radar data to the second. It turns out they not only went through that tornado, but maybe a second or third one right here as they came into the airport in Sioux Falls from northwest direction. That call and this study has been done many times in training 911 operators and also for storm chasers, and also it's a big hit when we do aviation seminars for pilots, so all that stuff going on. Anyway, I just want to show you just a few things about South Dakota. You know, just about everywhere I've been, people say, we love to talk about the weather here. No matter what part of the country I go to. I go to other countries. In England, oh, we love to talk about the weather here. France, we love to talk about it. Bulgaria, oh, we love to talk about the weather. But one thing I want to say is hopefully show you some of these things. Here in South Dakota, we really do have stuff to talk about. So thanks for your time. Yeah, if there's any questions. Yes?
Two questions, really. How fast is the updraft to sustain a 2-pound hailstone?
The estimates are about 250 miles per hour. On that day, you have two things that cause the updraft to form. One's the temperature difference, but also the humidity difference. Because people think, you know, they say when it's humid, they say the air is heavy. Actually, the opposite is true. Air is lighter if it's humid, and those two things combine.
And the second question is, have you ever tried to correlate farmers? I just read that the farmers in Alabama said we're going to have a bitter winter. Have you ever tried to correlate the projections of the farmers in Alabama to what actually happens?
It's actually, in my opinion, it's very much like you read the horoscope in the newspaper, you say, that horoscope is right pretty often. I mean, it's like, well, we'll have periods of sunshine in December. It's like, yeah, we will. There's something I did years ago and showed that statistically you can do stuff. What I did was I took a month, and I did this all on television, so I was able to document this. What I went and said was, okay, I'm going to take a month, and I'm going to look at statistically over the 20 years, how often has it rained on that day? So then I went and I randomly took the number of days that it normally runs, and I put it on the month. I put it on a calendar, posted it. I said, okay, there's that. And a month later, when I came back and looked, I was 70% right by forecasting a month in advance what days it was going to rain just by Gaussian noise. You know, that was, I mean, statistically you can do stuff like that. Now, there's a nice fella, he's a nice fella who is the meteorologist of the Farmer's Almanac, but it's, you know, it's, I don't know. I don't know what to say, because you can't really pin it down, because it says, well, we'll have a period of snow in December after Christmas. Well, somewhere we will, and I don't know. You take a look at it, tell me.
Is it 70% correct then?
Yeah, that's what I was able to show. 70% correct just by the noise, and including how many days does it usually rain in the month, I think it was July. So what I did was then randomly pick the days, just said, here, put them all over the thing, boom. And that, so just because of noise, you can get better than 50-50. It's kind of like blackjack in a casino, I think.
I'm amazed at the forecast that you can do in detail by zip code, temperature by the hour, and then continually updated, and it's usually fairly accurate. Of course, random walk would be 70% correct by year.
It's dramatically better than when I started. I mean, the stuff with computer modeling stuff is unbelievable. In my television station, we actually, I got in trouble for saying this one time in front of a Commerce Committee of the Senate. We actually pay to buy forecast models from Europe because they're the most accurate models in the world. And it's amazing how good they are compared to when I got here. And I remember Dave, you know, the wonderful Dave Dedrick, he would, for the whole KELO viewing area, he'd say, tomorrow's high, 35 to 75. You know, so he was always right. But it was just that, you know, it was ancient compared to what we have now and the stuff that, you know, thanks to forecast models we're able to do. Yeah. Yeah, Tim.
How much do you learn from kind of meteorologists worldwide? How much do you share?
A lot. I'm very fortunate to know meteorologists pretty much in every country of the world. I mean, it seems like that anyway. And we get together and we share notes. You know, some of these people are just amazing that I've been able to meet, and it's just like, you know, like we're sitting here too, and you're hearing from some of the smartest people on earth. It's just a blast. And one thing about weather, I think this happens, from what I don't know, you guys know more about medicine than I do. Sorry, doctor. But I've heard that at medical conferences that they're a little bit more cautious about putting stuff out there until they've got all the money's been made or whatever, the patents are done and stuff. But the weather community is amazingly good about sharing information. I mean, there's, you know, for my thing, when I was doing imagine this, when I was doing my dissertation, I had a question about, you know, this thing about a radar signature. I called the guy who did the first radar echo scene, and he talked to me for an hour, you know, gave me an hour's time. Imagine that as just a person studying. I got to call the world's expert on something. You know, it's great. Yes?
What are the most notable trends you've seen in tracking South Dakota weather in the last 30 years, and how does that stack up against, say, even further back historically?
The trend in the last 20 years and all the data has been for two things: a decrease in the number of tornadoes and an increase in the number of flash flooding events. So if you're buying insurance, that's kind of the thing to worry about now is, you know, how's the drainage on my property, because that's more likely to have an impact on you than a tornado is. And that is the thing. And I mean, you've probably noticed it here, we haven't had hardly any tornadoes. I mean, we just hardly have any anymore. But we have a lot of flash flooding events. And So if I was, depending on what you're building, what your business is, I'd be more concerned with the heavy rain. Is that going to cause you problems than a tornado? Because you're far more likely to get that. And that's a huge thing. Yeah.
Are the flash floods due to increasing rain or because we've affected the watersheds and are building in places that are less desirable?
That, and the fact that what we're seeing is, we used to see, okay, for tornadoes to form, usually you have a southeast wind down near the ground, bringing humid air. You have a dry middle part of the atmosphere. We get dry air coming in from Arizona or whatever. And aloft, you have a west or northwest wind. So you have this turning of the winds, with height. So that's what creates the spinning of the supercell. But now we're seeing is not so much spinning, so the air's moving in one direction, and so it brings rain rather than a spinning tornado. And as long as it keeps it oriented along the same, if the winds are all going in this direction, what does that do? It brings the rain to the same spot. And if you get a thunderstorm, you'll bring rain, then another cell, the same spot, then another, what we call training. So it's that as well. Mr. Munster.
Eastern Iowa last year, I believe it was, had a derecho, I believe it was called. What can you tell us about that, and should we look forward to those in South Dakota?
We have had those, not to the extent of northwest Iowa, but a derecho is, I don't like to call it like that. I usually call it just a wall of wind, because what it is a thunderstorm that usually has a lack of moisture attached to it. Often all the business on it is occurring up in the clouds, and the wind just comes down to the surface. So you don't need a lot of moisture. In fact, dry air is actually best for that. But once those get going, they just don't stop. I mean, we had one a few years ago here, started in Mobridge and ended up in Chicago, producing wind damage all the way. We have had those, and actually those are increasing slightly as well. Less tornadoes, more of the other stuff, because the wind, with that one, again, the winds are coming from the same direction at different speeds. Like a west wind at the ground, west wind aloft, west wind aloft. So it's going the same direction, and that's what we call being able to mix the wind down to the ground. So yeah, I mean, we had one, a month ago or something like that, 2 months ago, yeah. But they do big damage, widespread damage, much more widespread than a tornado. So that commercial they was talking about Eastern Iowa, they say, what does the commercial say? An inland hurricane, and every meteorologist bristles when they say it's not even close to the same thing scientifically. So, anything else? All right, thanks for your time.